Desperate battles waged by brave knights and dashing kings. An elegant wooden chess table standing in the center of a book-lined study. Humphrey Bogart pondering over a chessboard in Rick's American Cafe. The faces of school children on national television. Or perhaps memories of good times spent in a game with a friend. For more than 15 centuries, chess has amused and fascinated, enthralled and entertained people the world over. No one knows for sure, but historians believe chess was born in northern India sometime around 500 AD. Today, chess is an international pastime and a full-time job for hundreds of professional players who compete on the international circuit. More than 130 nations belong to the World Chess Federation, and some 60,000 avid chess fans from all walks of life belong to the United States Chess Federation. Millions more enjoy the game in homes and clubs, beaches, and parks. Why this fascination with chess? Because every chess game is like an adventure. No two games are ever quite alike. And there are no outside forces to affect the outcome. No throw of the dice, no draw of the cards. You alone are in charge of your army. You alone devise the battle plans. You alone conduct the attack and make the decisions. Learn more about this marvelous game. Join us for Play Chess Tape Number 2.
Play Chess 2, your guide to playing better chess. Presented by the United States Chess Federation. Participating in this program, National Master Bruce Pandolfini, renowned chess teacher, Chess Live columnist, and author of many best-selling books for novice players. And International Chess Master Vince McCambridge, one of the nation's most successful tournament chess players. Your host is David Matthau.
If you're brand new to chess and don't yet know the rules of the game, we suggest you watch Play Chess, the first tape in this series. In this tape, subtitled In Pursuit of a King, we explained the basic moves of the pieces and passed along some important tips to get new players started. To learn more about chess, we need to speak the language of chess. Let's review the chess notation system covered in the first tape. We always map out the chessboard from white's point of view.
The rows of squares running from side to side are called ranks. There are 8 ranks, numbered from 1 to 8. The rows of squares running up and down the board are called files. There are 8 files, labeled A to H. To name any square on the board, you need to know its file and its rank.
This square is on file F and rank 5. F5. This is square H2. And this is square C7. To write the moves of the pieces, we use one-letter abbreviations.
For a knight, we use an N, because K is reserved for the king. And we need no letter for pawns. To write down a move, we must know the piece that is moving, the square it's moving from, and the square it's moving to.
With the help of Kathy Vetter, we'll take a look at a few moves. If the king on F3 moves to E4, write it this way. Or you can simply write KE4. If the rook on A7 moves to E7, we write it this way. Or just RE7 followed by a plus sign.
The plus sign stands for check. A double plus sign is checkmate. Kingside castling is written 0-0. Queenside castling is written 0-0-0.
Serious players use only one design of chess set. It's called a Staunton set, after Howard Staunton, an English champion in the mid-19th century.
The design was licensed by the Jacques Company of London, and Staunton agreed to lend his influential name to the design, surely one of the first endorsements in professional sports. Chess players have chosen the Staunton set as the standard for serious play because it's simple yet elegant. Perhaps you've tried to play a game on a friend's fancy chess set only to find you can't tell one piece from another.
It's reassuring for tournament chess players to know that no matter where they go in the world, they'll always be able to find a familiar-looking Staunton set. No two chess games are ever alike. They can last only a few moves, as you'll see later, or they can last for 100 moves or more. Chess games usually last about 40 or 50 moves. A well-played game, one in which the two contestants are evenly matched, typically has 3 separate phases: the opening, the middle game, and the end game.
In the opening, you concentrate on developing your pieces to good squares so that you can get ready for the coming battle. As you learned in our first tape, Play Chess, in the opening, you try to do several things.
You try to control the center of the board. To begin the game, you typically move the pawn in front of your king or queen 2 squares. You try to post your pieces in good positions. In general, you try to develop your knights first, then your bishops. You also try to castle your king so that he can have a safe place from which to observe the battle. In the opening, try to make no more than 2 pawn moves until all your pieces are developed. Because pawns can never move backward, it's important that you move them with care. Our final tip: avoid bringing your queen into play until after you've developed most of your other pieces and have castled. The queen is your most powerful piece. It pays to wait a few moves until you can see just how the game is shaping up. Once you know how the battle lines are being drawn, then you're ready to deploy your queen in the most effective manner.
When your pieces are developed, the contest enters the middle game. In this stage, the players maneuver for position, trying to control the board and to carry out their attacking plays. In one game recently played between 2 grandmasters of chess, the opening we just saw led to this typical middle game position.
Notice that both sides have castled their kings into safety. White has deployed all his pieces and has linked up his rooks on the back rank. A furious battle is about to take place.
After the smoke clears and only a few pieces remain on the board, the endgame begins. In the endgame, the players struggle to transform the advantages they gained earlier in the middle game into a winning plan. From the middle game position we just looked at comes this interesting position.
With few pieces remaining on the board, it's now safer for the king to venture out to take an active role in the battle. The most important theme in endgame play is the struggle to promote a pawn to a queen. Gaining a queen often gives you the extra force you need to hunt down the enemy king and deliver checkmate. In this endgame, White concentrated on transforming his extra pawn into a queen, and he eventually won.
Some players tend to concentrate on just one aspect of the game. The opening is especially popular because volumes and volumes of research are available on opening strategies. But all 3 phases of the game are important, and you should study them all if you want to become a well-rounded chess player. If you don't know how to win a favorable endgame position, for example, all of your study of openings will do you little good.
As you follow along, you'll want to keep in mind the value of the pieces, as discussed in our first tape. Let's take a moment to recap.
The pawn is the least powerful of all your pieces, and therefore we use the pawn as our basic unit of measure. We think of a pawn as being 1 point. A bishop and knight are each worth 3 points, or 3 pawns. A rook is worth 5 points. A queen is worth 9 points.
Once you've played chess for a while, you'll begin to evaluate your chess army not in points, but in terms of the actual trades you'll make in the midst of battle. For example, you might see a chance to trade a rook for a bishop and a pawn, but you'd know that you would need at least another pawn before you could consider such a trade to be even for you materially. Just like athletes, many chess players like to warm up before a big contest. They do it by playing a quick game with a friend or a chess computer, or by analyzing a chess problem from a book. Here's an excellent warm-up exercise for novices, a challenging way to help you practice moving the knight, and it shows you a method for analyzing chess positions of all types. Your goal in this knight's tour is to move the knight to each square on the board. You must first get the knight to B1, then to C1, then to D1, and so on. You cannot move the knight to a square where a pawn could capture it, and you cannot capture any of the pawns. The pawns create an obstacle course for the knight. Time yourself to see how you do.
When you're not sure how to tackle a complicated task, try breaking it down into a series of simpler, separate tasks. To discover how to get to B1, first find all of the squares a knight could be in order to move to B1. As it turns out, there's just one.
The knight can get to B1 only from A3. A knight on C3 or D2 could also move to B1, but these squares are off limits in this exercise. The black pawn is on C3 and it controls the square D2. Therefore, your task is to find a way for the knight to get to A3. Now it's easier to see the answer. First square accomplished. Now let's look for a way to get to C1. The knight cannot go to D2 or C3. Second square accomplished. And the third. Continuing in this fashion, the knight can move across the first rank to H1, then up to H2, and back across the second rank. The knight will end its tour on square A8.
Chess is a great art and a great science, and yet, like all great endeavors, chess is based on a single simple idea. In chess, your ultimate goal is to checkmate the enemy king. Mathematicians tell us that there are more ways to checkmate a king than there are grains of sand on all the world's beaches.
So how do we begin learning about checkmates? Well, we begin at the ending. Several types of checkmates occur frequently in the endgame. If you know these basic checkmates, you know what types of positions you can win, and therefore you have a goal to play for in the rest of the game. Let's start by seeing how to checkmate a lone king with 2 rooks. Most novice players like to check the enemy king, but that just isn't productive. Here, take a look. Check. And let's try some more checks. White hasn't achieved anything yet, and now the rook must run away or be captured. As in solving any problem in life, in chess you must have a plan. In this case, the idea is to find a way to ensnare the king in an escape-proof net. So how can you do that? Notice first how the rooks exert a line of force across the board. The A file and B file are definitely off limits for the enemy king. That gives us an idea. We want to use the rook's sweeping powers to limit the king's movement, and finally to force the king into a trap. Our first move is rook to b4. This immediately limits the king to exactly 1/2 of the board. The king, sensing danger, rushes to fight off the rook. And now the other rook comes into action with rook to a5. Check. The rooks combine their long-range powers to roll the king toward the edge of the board. The rook on b4 fences the king in. The rook on a5 pushes him backward, establishing a new and tighter fence. The king has only 3 possible moves: to e6, d6, or c6. The black king isn't about to give up. He moves to c6, seeking to drive the rooks away. Now white can't continue the roll because rook to b6 check simply allows black to play king takes rook. Therefore, white leaves the rook on a5 to keep black fenced in, and white repositions the rook on b4 far out of reach of the king. The black king attacks the rook on a5. And so this rook too moves out of danger, but still to a place where it can once again begin to roll the king toward the edge of the board. Now you can see how the game will end. King to c6, rook to h6, check. King to d7, rook to g7, check. King to e8, rook to h8, and checkmate.
Now we are ready to tackle a bit more challenging checkmate, a queen and king versus a king. This is an important checkmate for you to know. In many games between evenly matched players, one player might have just one pawn left at the end of the game. But if that pawn can get to the other side of the board, it becomes a queen. And that's enough to decide the fate of the game most of the time.
White has successfully cornered the king. However, there is great danger for white. If you were to play a move here for white, what would it be? Let's hope you don't decide to make a king move. The black king has no legal moves. If white doesn't remedy that situation, black will be in stalemate, turning white's easily won game into a draw. Let's see how white should handle the situation. First, white must back off just a bit by playing queen to b5. This lets the black king move freely on the squares a7 and a8. Now, white can bring the king in for the final blow. Here's how it would go. King to a7, king to c6, king to a8, queen to a7, checkmate. The black king cannot run from the white queen's attack, and the black king cannot capture the white queen because the queen is protected by the white king. You can practice this checkmate with a friend. Better yet, you can practice this checkmate against a computer. After all, the computer doesn't mind being on the losing side while you practice your checkmating skills. Try this exercise at home.
Here's a hint. Just as you saw when we tried the checkmate with 2 rooks, aimless checks get you nowhere. Use the queen to chase the king into a corner. Remember the pattern you saw in our first position. When the queen is a knight's move away from the enemy king,
the king has no choice but to back away. You take it from here. Mating a king with just a rook takes even more cooperation between your pieces. Remember how we first set up the roll against an enemy king with 2 rooks. But in this case, you don't have a second rook to help out in the attack. The king must take the place of that rook, placing himself in front of the enemy king. When 2 kings stand face to face like this, we say they are in opposition. The white king sets up a barrier that the black king cannot traverse. If white can set up this position and be able to give check, white can begin to roll the black king toward the edge of the board for a checkmate. Let's look at a position that shows some important ideas in this type of checkmate. The black king already prevents the white king from moving to c2 and c3. Therefore, if black checks white by playing rook to b8, the white king's only escape squares are toward the edge of the board. 2 alternatives: to move to the A file or to move to C1. Let's look at both alternatives. This leads to a quick and pretty checkmate. In this position, white has only 1 escape square, D1. On D1, the white king would be in opposition to the black king. Try to visualize the white king on D1. On D1, the white king would be checkmated if the rook on B8 moved to B1. So now that you visualize the checkmating position, make it happen. The key is for the black pieces to somehow retain the essential position, control of the squares B1, B2, C2, and D2. Black can do that with a move such as rook to B7, simply killing time. Now, white must make the only move that leads to checkmate. Checkmate. Now let's go back and take a look at white's other alternative. White can also move his king to the A file. When you're trying to avoid checkmate, it's always a good idea to stay away from the corners of the board. Therefore, let's look at what happens if white plays the best move, king to A3. Black needs to move his king up and create opposition again, but the direct approach doesn't work. If black plays king to C3, white can just move out of opposition with king to A4. This ruins the checkmating possibility. Therefore, black plays king to C4. White cannot play king to A4 because that would bring him into opposition with black's king. Therefore, white can only try to run away by moving to A2. But black mercilessly closes in with king to C3. Now you can see how the game ends.
Black's knight on B8 and his bishop on F8 are mere spectators.
Black decides he's had enough and tries to drive some of Morphy's attackers away. Black plays his pawn from B7 to B5, hoping that the white bishop will retreat.
But black isn't so lucky. Morphy knows that a retreat will simply give black some time to disentangle his forces. Now is the time to cash in on his lead in development. Morphy sacrifices his knight on c3, taking the pawn on b5.
Black has no real choice but to capture. With pawn at c6, takes the knight on b5.
In turn, Morphy plays bishop on c4, captures on b5, giving check. Morphy has 2 pawns for his sacrificed knight. All things being equal, you need at least 3 pawns to consider it an even exchange for a knight. But Morphy's lead in development is worth far more than a pawn.
It absolutely is. After all, black has only one reasonable way to escape check, and that's to play the knight from b8 to d7, blocking the bishop's attack on the king. Black finally gets a chance to develop this knight, and all he can do is immobilize it in a deadly pin.
Morphy now castles queenside. Even this seemingly conservative move brings more pressure to bear on the black center. Morphy chose to castle queenside because this brings the rook at a1 to d1, where it bears down on the pinned knight at d7. White now threatens to play bishop on b5, captures the knight on d7 with check. This would be a real disaster for black, because there's really no way he can recapture without losing his queen. For example, queen takes bishop just meets with rook takes queen. Furthermore, if knight were to take the bishop, then white's bishop on g5 would capture black's queen on e7. Resetting the position at the branching point.
So you see, in the face of these threats, black has only one reasonable defense: rook from a8 to d8. The real beauty of this game is the way Morphy succeeds in using powerful moves to leave black with so few reasonable defenses.
Morphy recognizes that he's placed his attacking pieces on their most effective squares. Black is absolutely incapable of making any productive moves. Now is the time to look for a winning idea. And Morphy finds one. He plays rook on d1, takes on d7.
At first glance, it might look like Morphy is just giving up a rook for a knight. But when black recaptures with rook takes rook at d7, we begin to see the point. The bishop on b5 pinned the knight at d7, and now it pins the rook at d7. Morphy is slowly reducing every single piece in black's army to a state of complete helplessness.
And so therefore Morphy plays rook to d1, developing his last piece and attacking the rook at d7.
Black must deal with the threat of bishop takes rook at d7 with check. As we saw a few moves earlier, black can't recapture with either the knight or the queen, because in either case he loses the queen. After bishop at b5 takes d7 check in this hypothetical variation, if black were to move his king to d8, that would also be suicide, because white would then play queen at b3 to b8, and the result would be checkmate. Let's go back to the actual position now. One of black's main problems in this position is that his knight on f6 is pinned against his queen. Therefore, black removes the pin by moving his queen from e7 to e6. Of course, black knows that Morphy could simply play in this position. Bishop at g5 takes f6. And after black recaptures by queen at e6 takes f6. Then bishop on b5 takes d7 with check. But that would still leave both sides with the same number of pieces. One queen, one bishop, and one rook for each side. Sure, Morphy would be ahead by 2 pawns, enough to ensure an easy win in the endgame. But you can bet that Morphy would rather get the game over quickly so he could return to the opera.
Before we show you the brilliant combination of moves that made this game famous, let's see how Morphy discovered the winning idea. Morphy looked at the positions of his pieces and black's pieces and recognized a familiar pattern. We can see it too. Take the rook at d7 and the knight on f6 off the board, as well as the bishop on b5. They are not needed for this pattern. If it is white's turn in this position, he could move the rook on d1 to d8, giving checkmate. The bishop on g5, of course, protects the rook on d8. Pattern recognition is one of the things that helps experienced players decide on strategies. Morphy had seen this pattern before and began to look for a way to bring it about in this game. Let's return to the position we were at beforehand. All he has to do is find a way to get rid of the rook at d7 and the knight at f6. The first step is to capture the rook on d7 with the bishop from b5, giving check. Probably his opponents just thought Morphy was trying to recoup the material he had sacrificed, but he's actually after a checkmate.
Black has only one reasonable move, and that's knight on f6 takes the bishop on d7. No doubt the Frenchmen were completely unprepared for what came next.
The first part of his mission is now accomplished. With the knight gone on f6, the bishop on g5 has control of the square d8. The next question is how to dislodge that pesky knight from d7. I bet some of you already see the move. It's queen to b8. Check.
What a shock this move must have been to Morphy's opponents. Morphy throws his most important piece to the wind. And black has no other way to get out of check than to play knight at d7 takes queen on b8.
And there we have it. Rook to d8, coming from d1, mate. The artistry of this position is picture perfect. Morphy has only 2 pieces left, but they are the only 2 pieces he needs to give the mate. A beautiful game.
Yes, and what is important to remember here is not the tactical wizardry of the last few moves. Morphy was able to play these combinations because he developed a strategy and saw it through. He achieved a lead in development and continued to apply pressure to black's position. When Morphy refused to take the easy pawn on b7, he had not yet foreseen the end of the game. But he knew that by playing good developing and attacking moves, he could eventually make black's position fall apart. It's a lesson we can all learn to apply in our own games.
It's said that more has been written about the game of chess than all other games combined. You can always find a good book on chess at your local bookstore or library, and the United States Chess Federation provides hundreds of titles for players of all abilities.
3 new books by Bruce Pandolfini are especially worth looking for. In the Principles of the New Chess, Bruce gives you a chess lesson exactly as if you were sitting across the board from him. His book, The ABCs of Chess, presents Bruce's 50 best columns from Chess Life magazine. In his newest book, Endgame Course, Bruce uses the games of the chess world champions to teach you the principles of this important phase of the game. 2 other fine books for novices are Irving Chernev's Logical Chess, Move by Move, and the best-selling Bobby Fischer Teaches Chess, a favorite of chess teachers everywhere. Those of you who want to know more about chess tournament etiquette should have a copy of the U.S. Chess Federation's Official Rules of Chess.
The United States Chess Federation sells all these books and hundreds more. They also have a wide selection of chess computers, chess sets, and chess equipment of all types. The United States Chess Federation will also be glad to send you information on other topics, such as chess notation, chess by mail, chess by computer network, anything to do with chess. Just write or call them. A not-for-profit organization, the United States Chess Federation publishes Chess Life magazine.
Whether you enjoy a game every now and then, or like to curl up with a book or Chess Life magazine, you'll find chess to be a lifetime adventure. The great American master William Napier once wrote, "Of chess it has been said that life is not long enough for it. The fault of life, not chess." For Bruce Pandolfini, Vince McCambridge, Kathy Vetter, and all of the other people who helped make this program possible, this is David Mathau wishing you good luck as you set out on your own new adventures in chess.
This has been an educational presentation of the United States Chess Federation. Doug Cole speaking.